And to take that theme forward, I want to welcome Mischa Dohler, co-founder of World Sensing, to look at how smart cities are developing around the world.
Now, cities on this planet are so different. People, history, infrastructure, governance. How could you possibly cast them into one single smart city framework? Cities are messy. They are inefficient. And by being messy and inefficient, they are what they are. They are a beautiful place with a lot of aura. And they're actually very resilient, because we figure out that resilience and efficiency do not necessarily go hand in hand. Having said this, traveling the globe, knocking on different cities, town halls, doors, trying to sell our world sensing solutions, I figured out there are about 3 types of different cities. There are those cities which are very heavily return of investment driven, so they want to install stuff which is kind of bringing them some cash, of course being some utility to the citizens, but also making a good amount of money. There are cities which are carbon driven, so they want to install stuff, they want to use stuff, they want to make the city smarter simply by having stuff which lowers essentially the pollution, the carbon footprint, etc. And then we have vanity driven cities, so cities which just want to show off. There might be a sports event going on, something happening on the globe, and they want to just show the world, hey, we are good enough, we are smart enough, we're installing something here in our city to make this city smart. Now, we have been selling the very same product into each of these types of cities, and of course we have to use a very different pitch. So we are traffic leader in smart traffic leader using sensor inputs, and of course selling that into return of investment driven cities like London, New York, Los Angeles. We would say, well, you deploy this stuff, and with these sensors, you can essentially guide the traffic more efficiently. Maybe you can find the infringers quicker. So in essence, you're buying back the infrastructure within 6 months, 9 months, and then you make a good, essentially, return of investment on the infrastructure. Now, this very same thing we sell into the carbon-driven cities is saying we make it for the people very difficult, actually, to find the parking spaces. We throttle the traffic into the cities, so we're doing exactly the opposite. Now, in the carbon-driven cities, in the vanity-driven cities, we have used different approaches. So we're selling into the Middle East, we're selling to Russia, we're selling to China, we're selling into South America. So one thing we approached, we essentially proposed is with our smartphone app, whenever people would actually use the smartphone app, the picture of the mayor would pop up and saying, powered by whatever. So, you have to be innovative in that space, and you need to understand that cities are really, really different. Having said that, all of those cities actually, when they talk about the smartness of their cities, never actually look at the citizen themselves. So I've been alluding to that aspect in that conference quite a few times. They always look at the infrastructure. So let's stick with that. What they mean really by this infrastructure is essentially they're trying to roll out an internet here. And we don't have a single internet. We actually have 3 different internets. So we have an internet which is the fixed internet connecting computers. We have a mobile internet which is connecting our laptops and smartphones. And we have this emerging Internet of Things. Now they're all very different, whilst the fixed internet and the mobile internet is perceived as the internet. And if I ask you to imagine that internet, you think of the Amazons, right? You think of the eBays, you think of this huge opportunity the internet is giving you. If I ask you to do the very same thing with the Internet of Things, something very different will come out. You will be imagining objects, you're imagining sensors, right? So we're not thinking of this total opportunity yet. There's no thinking of an eBay of the Internet of Things, etc. So we're still quite far here actually from the whole opportunity space, what that Internet of Things, that connectivity of sensors can offer to us. And one of the reasons is because we have actually done quite a few mistakes whilst we designed it. So we spent the last 10, 15 years trying to design essentially a connectivity framework for these objects, for the sensors, for the actuators. We try to come up with this next generation Ethernet cable, right? So that's what we wanted to do. That cable, as of 2014, of course, is a little bit more intelligent than the one we did 30 years ago. So it is wireless. It's a wireless entity we're designing here. And we thought these sensors will be essentially battery driven. So, you can't change batteries every day, twice a day. It needs to be very power efficient. So let's come up with a very low power solution, and some of you will know that. We started designing this Zigbee type of system, right? We really try hard to come up with a system which allows us to connect these sensors with a battery lifetime of 5, 10, 20 years. Now, by doing so, we came up with a good connectivity. We made it internet kind of enabled, so we put IP on top, which was a big challenge because these machines, they can't really process these kilobits of IP packets. So we standardized that. We web enabled them. So we actually allow them to talk the very same language as your web browser. So if we wanted to, you could type in today www.mischadohler.com/temperature, and if I had a temperature sensor with me, this is what you would see. That was a beautiful design. 10 years, 15 years is what it cost us to do a very big community. And what we achieved is we could leverage on all the networking skill of all the Cisco engineers to also use that skill with the Internet of Things. We also leverage on all the Java programmer skills. So we could use the skill set of the people programming websites, JavaScript, etc., to actually use that essentially on the Internet of Things. And we're able to connect very small, embedded, low-power devices in the field with a supercomputer on the other end of the planet. Now, the only problem is it didn't work. And we realized that about 2010, that there were some serious technical problems. That was when I just came out of Orange France Telecom, where I worked specifically on these type of projects. And we realized a few problems. The first problem is it was too engineering driven. Actually, power was not a problem at all. Power gives you range, right? Low range is low power, high range is high power. But it's not draining your battery. Energy is draining your battery. And from your engineering days, you will remember that power and energy is related via time. So that's number one we realized is, hey, wouldn't it be much better to have a high power system communicating in a very short time, consuming maybe the very same amount of energy as my Zigbee stack does, right? So that's mistake number one. Mistake number two is we didn't understand the seriousness of the type of things we want to instrument. There's a lot of very critical stuff out there in the city you need to instrument. We as a company, we signed a service level agreement with our final client. And it turns out that in the bands, in the typical spectrum bands we operate, which is the ISM band where Wi-Fi operates as well as, by regulation, you're not allowed to sign a service level agreement with operators. That actually restricts dramatically your operational capabilities of rolling out this Internet of Things. B2C for consumers is fine, but once you get a little bit in more serious space, that's the end of the story. So there's a problem there. The other problem is that actually the chip cost itself, so the Zigbee chip cost, matters very little. What matters is the total cost of ownership. So Zigbee uses low power, needs to build a mesh multi-hop network to cover the city or a whole building. So you have loads of degrees of freedom. It's great for academics. They can publish infinitely, but it's very bad for industry because things typically don't work. And that's exactly what happened. I had to hire 2 or 3 engineers just to troubleshoot 24/7 in the field our sensor networks. If you divide this by the number of rollouts we had, suddenly a 50-cent Zigbee chip costs you $50, right? So it wouldn't be great to have a package together which addresses exactly those 3 problems. So we started working on that as a community. So there's the Wi-Fi community now working on that, and you will hear very soon a new system coming out, which is the low-power Wi-Fi. Totally new standard, allows you to use your Wi-Fi infrastructure, of which we have a lot, to connect your sensors in a very energy-efficient manner. That will be happening around 2015-16, and will drive probably all the indoor and citywide type of IoT deployments, to the point that finally we can actually forget about this cable and the connectivity and focus on the opportunity. Yeah? So what else is coming? We have low power wide area networks. I'm not sure you know of that, but I'll give you an example. So we're using that. We have it in our smart parking node, and that node is sending once an hour in a live tone, just saying I'm here, that's my status, etc. When my CEO was landing in Paris, he had that node in his luggage. It was connecting to the gateway in Barcelona. So there's a connectivity of 900 kilometers That contrasts to 10 meters or 20 meters of Zigbee, which is driving the IoT today, or has been driving in the past. 900 kilometers of link budget is so good that we could talk to satellites. We could theoretically instrument the whole planet and have all these devices talk to the satellites in space. So that's a big revolution coming now. So we're working on the standards embodiment of that. What else is coming? Cellular. Yes, big surprise. So we think in the future, 5G design, etc., we will be powering all our embedded devices, our sensors and actuators, using cellular radios. Now, they will not be as big as you carry them in your pocket. They will not need to be recharged twice a day. That will work really seamlessly, energy efficient, but with a very, very big value proposition is that you can actually sign service level agreements on that. So I as a company, can forget whether a packet goes through or doesn't go through, because the actual responsibility is with my operator. By the time we have that ecosystem ready, we'll probably be 2018, 2020, so still a few years to go until we can forget about this next generation Ethernet cable and we can focus on the opportunity. Now let's zoom forward a little bit. Let's assume we have it all solved and we start collecting a lot of data. So we get a lot of real-time data. We get a lot of real-time data from the sensors, from people from the smartphones, from the internet in general. So you come up with this big data picture, which, as you know, is a big term currently in the community. And to polarize things even worse is that we as academics actually have a very different understanding what big data is to what the industry thinks about it. Okay, so industry thinks about something big, something fast, etc. The 3 Vs, the 4 Vs, 5 Vs, 10 Vs, I don't know how many there are now, it's 2014. But as an academic, we always think of big data essentially the data which is beyond our reach. It is the data which, if it's like a terabit we can handle, so it's the one beyond that. It's if we can handle 10 nanoseconds of processing of the data, so it's the thing beyond that. So for us academics, in fact, big data was always a journey. We started essentially, even the first bit to generate was a big data exercise. It has been beyond our capabilities until we were able to do that. So we start collecting, building essentially the whole big data picture. And you will figure very quickly that we have the algorithms today to handle large volumes of data, but we don't have actually the data, literally the smart city data, to make anything meaningful out of this, right? So we don't have large amounts of city data to process now these days. We have platforms like the ones of IBM, of Cisco, etc., but there's no data. And the reason is, and I understood that essentially for my company, is because A, there's very little data being actually produced in the field, and B, very little data is being released, right? So each of us may have a good sets of data, but the really big data pictures coming once you actually open it up and you mash it up. But that's not happening. And I can tell you why it's not happening on our end. World Sensing is not releasing the data, even though we produce gigabits of data every day, because we don't know what happens with that data. We don't understand the value chain. We don't know what's the value, the dollar, the euro, the pound value of a single bit of data generated in this city. We just don't know. If I don't know that, I don't know how much I can sell it on for, how much money can be made out of this, what is it powering in the future. So we have essentially an understanding of big data, we have an understanding of open data, but we have no understanding of the big data, open data value chain, which in our opinion holds back essentially a lot of the opportunities in the big data space. Okay, so let's put it all together. Let's assume we have solved that, we have the infrastructure solved, we get a lot of data from the Internet of Things, the Internet in general, we have the big data solved now. Question is, how do you innovate on that? So how do you innovate in this city? We hear a lot about smart cities innovation, smart city companies. So how is it that we hear a lot about this, but very little is actually visible out there, right? So there's a contrast here. The reason is because it's very simple, very easy as of 2014 to show a smart city on Internet of Things concept. Very simple, but it's very difficult to actually get it out into the cities. Why is it so easy? Because we're creative, loads of ideas, get together in these clusters, come up with good ideas, build a PowerPoint, very simple, build a prototype, very simple, takes you 1 week, 3D printing, maker's movement, get a prototype up and running, can show it off. Well, that's a prototype, and that's essentially where it typically stops, unfortunately. Because to get it really out in the city, you need to make a product out of this, right? So there's a big difference between a prototype and a product, and there's an even bigger difference between a product and a company. And that's something I think we all struggle with. As innovators, I created my own company, and these two transitions were extraordinarily painful. And whilst there's a lot of support for the first phase, I feel there's not so much support for the second phase and third phase. And I think there's really an opportunity here in general for London or for whichever cluster we look at to help essentially young companies. Now, why is it so difficult to get things out? It is because if you look at the smart city today, you essentially still have two parties. You have a smart part and you have the city part, right? So you have the smart part, which are the Ciscos, the IBMs, the innovators, etc. And you have the city part, which are the NSLs, the Swarcos, companies you have never heard of. And they're actually using the whole space. They have been in the city for the last 100 years. They have been drawing parking lights. They have been installing the street lighting. They have been building the buildings. And they are actually owning the real estate in this city. So the big challenge, I think, of the 21st century is to bring them together. These two giants, the IT giants, the smart people, and the infrastructure giant, the city people, to actually make a smart city happen. And I think that's the biggest challenge. And the innovative companies, they're caught in between. We started, my background is an IT background. We started talking to the Cisco and the IBMs, etc., until we figured out they're not the ones who write the check for my 50 people to get their salary. These are the other guys, the city guys, right? And they have very different requirements. They're not running on smartness, they're running on procurements. Procurement is minimum requirements and minimum cost. So you tell me how to build smartness into something which is minimum requirements, minimum cost. So we have a problem here. And the other problem is, because we run through procurement, sales cycles are very long. So you get a cash flow problem very quickly. As a young innovative company, you can live easily for a year, 2 years. So we see a lot of companies coming up. I told you it's very easy to come up with solutions. But to survive beyond the 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, that's a very big challenge. And we have currently no mechanisms in place which would help those small innovative players to essentially go through this cash flow problem they're facing in the tough city market, so to say. Having said this, let's say we all kind of solved this, right? So we talked about the city a little bit, the technology, the data, the innovation, how we put it all together as a product. Why do we use it in the end of the day is, of course, because of you as citizens, as people. You would like people to use it in the end of the day, because the citizen of the 21st century is very different from the citizen of last century, last millennium. So people like to get engaged these days. People really care about their cities. They want to see the city essentially become smart. So to demonstrate that, I actually went out in London and I interviewed people about London, their smart city, right? So let's give it a go. Okay. So I was out there, it was actually December last year. I was interviewing a lot of people out there, 400 to be precise. Some of them I filmed them, some of them I didn't film. I was actually with my board without, lost tourist with my badge, red shoes, no red shoes. I tried it all. And nobody stopped. Out of 400 people, maybe 3 people bothered actually to talk to me, right? So here you go, so much to engagement, and I realized really no matter at what time of the day, which city on this planet, what type of question I would ask the people there, the answer would always be the same. They would walk past. So that's essentially the reality of our smart cities engagement today, and I'm urging cities essentially to maybe kind of revamp their views on citizen engagement and how to go about the whole thing. I don't have a solution on that. I'm not a specialist on this. I know cities try, but hard reality is they would just walk past. Now, things are not that dramatic, so let me finish off with the beautiful insight I had. First of all, so I got some big data inside here, right? So I got a lot of data. So first thing I figured out that the vehemence of saying no actually was strongly correlated to the walking speed, right? So people who would go very slowly would say no. People who run would say no, okay? Then there was an inverse correlation, very interesting, between the speed of walking and the timing of the response, right? So people who walk very slowly, they essentially take their time, right? And people who are running, they immediately tell me no. And now fasten your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen. There are people in London who would respond to my question before I've even asked the question. Now with that type of relativity effect, you know, we could actually do surveys in London and then finish earlier than we started. Thank you very much.
I've got a quick question for Mischa on the art of street surveys and big data. A really good untold story, really pulling down some of the myths and hype around smart cities and big data. Any questions from Mischa? Anybody want to? Very good. No? Going. Yes, here we go, Marie. Mike is coming.
Okay, clearly you only did your study in London. But do you think it would be the same in other cities? Because we've been talking a lot about, you know, clusters of innovation in Manhattan, San Francisco, name it. But would the same thing happen into other different cultures?
You mean the interviewing or
yeah,
the
interviewing
innovation
and
picture?
yes, your study overall, you know, this untold stories. Is London a unique place?
No, actually, you know, the innovation dilemma in smart cities is a global problem.
It's a
global problem, I think, right? So, yeah. Now, the citizen engagement is a universal problem, right? So, I really think you would come out, of course, that is exaggerated. Okay, so once you go to a small action, to the more interesting long-tail cities, of which we have more than the big cities, probably people would stop, more people would engage. In fact, the 3 people who stopped were not from London, right? So here you go. And
did you direct them to the Houses of Parliament?
No, what the real problem is that, you know, the citizen engagement currently, cities talk a lot about this, and the simple way of doing that is the digital means, okay? And which may not be that was my whole point actually in my original, I did the TED Talks on that, so my actual point was on that. The problem is that you think you engage a lot with the audience, but in reality you may not actually reach the people you really want to talk to, the elderly, the kids, etc., who don't have the digital means. So you need to go out and talk, and then people suddenly have a totally different priority. So that's what I wanted to show. It's not a recipe, it's not a criticism, it's just, you know, you see yourself here actually, right?
It was fun, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks very much. Thank you.